So there's a famous book, it was the best of times and it was the worst of times, right? You've heard that expression before, very famous saying. And I would say it is still the best of times and it is the worst of times. In the reading from the Old Testament today, Elijah goes to the mountain of Horeb and hears God speak. And how does God speak to him? In the silence. We live in a world where silence is almost impossible to achieve. Sometimes I can sit in the Adoration Chapel and hear the thumping noise from downtown. That hasn't happened in a while, thanks be to God. Even our own crab festival. You know, it's just noise, 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 noise. And we have to have silence. I mean, it is as necessary as oxygen for our spiritual life. Period. And we carry around with us, most of us, a constant source of distraction. And if it's not actually buzzing at us or blinking at us, it's there and has its own little aura around it. Especially young people. You know, I'm speaking to a crowd that isn't maybe as possessed by the phone as if I had a church full of teenagers. But it's literally, if it's not an actual noise, it's something that disturbs the silence. So fighting for silence. And then we come into this, this idea of purity of heart and mind and vision in the gospel. I was thinking about this morning. It's the best of times and it's the worst of times. Another kind of expression that you've all heard. You've all heard this, I'm sure, that we must love people and use things, right? And what is our great temptation? To love things and to use people. And, Jesus doesn't mention pornography in here, but he does mention pornography. If you look at a woman with lust, you have committed adultery. I remind people of this sometimes. Pornography is adultery. It's adultery. And it is not like, the common cold. It's like the Spanish flu. It kills. It kills people's soul. Jesus is, when he's telling us about looking at lust, he's not, whistling Dixie. He is speaking spiritual truths to fallen human nature. Now again, God's commands and Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, this is calling us to become the people we were created to be in the image and likeness of God, that love people and use things. But this truth has to come into us personally. I can stand up here and tell you all about it, but at some point you have to hear it from God. And how are you going to hear it from God? What do you need for that? Little silence. And then the phone will be barking at you. Look at me, 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 look at me. My brothers and sisters, it is the best of times. We have it so good in ways that our forefathers could not have imagined. the medicine and the food and the air conditioning and the transportation and everything that we have. And then we have an epidemic of anxiety and depression and addiction that is almost unspeakable. And so we pray today that we hear Jesus speak to us in the Gospels, in the teachings of the church, and that we can carve into our lives a little silence, that he speaks to us personally and teaches us how to love people, and to use the good things that he has given us.